Hey artists, we're going to make these beautiful Northern Lights pictures. I'll show you all the steps. Okay, my first step is going to be putting water on the page. We need to go by section because if we get the whole thing wet, we probably will have it drying on us before we get the color on. So I'm going to try to do the top section, and then I'll do the middle section and then get down toward the bottom. So I'm thinking about the Northern Lights and what I've seen in the pictures and things like that. And I definitely see, some dark blue in the sky for that nighttime sky. And this is why we're putting lots of water on our paper, as you can really see how the water takes the paint and moves it. Then we see like maybe some streaks of bright greens in the sky. So I'll add in some of that here. And maybe some of those pinks glowing in the sky. And so we're just putting different kind of chunks of color and making sure we're keeping the paper nice and wet, so when we add the salt, it'll have that effect we're looking for. So that's still nice and wet. We have some different chunks of color. I'm going to sprinkle the salt just gently, not a ton and not all over my paper, just on the wet paint. Now while that does its magic, I'm going to go down and work on the next section. So we want to get the paper wet first. I definitely don't want to have this be a line, so I'm kind of making sure that water breaks up that line because we want a nice fluid sky. And maybe down here closer to the trees, we'll have some more of these really bright pieces of color in here. I want to make sure not to go painting over the salt because we need the salt to keep drying. So I'm trying to keep my paint from that piece and below. All right, and once I'm satisfied there, I'm going to put some water because I'm going to start working on this last section down here. And I'm going to sprinkle this middle piece with some salt. Now I'm going to be drawing the trees down here, so I'm just going to try to have a little bit of that colorful background kind of popping up behind where my trees are. So I'm just going to add in some of the color that I see. Lots of cool colors. Lots of blues and greens and purples, but then also even some little spikes of orange I can see, and little spikes of the pinks and reds. All right, making sure this is nice and wet. I'm going to sprinkle that with salt too. Something I was careful to do is make sure that I did not mix the colors all up, creating more of a brown muddy color. I left the chunks of color kind of big and separate. We made sure the paper was wet first, so the watercolor kind of moved and didn't stay in really rigid pieces. Now we're going to take this to the drying rack and let the salt do its magic. Now that it's dry, we just kind of rub our hand over the salt a little bit to get that off of there. And you can see areas where the salt pulled the paint and made these fun little swirling kind of cosmic looks here on the paper. And now we're going to go down here and we're going to layer some oil pastels to show where the trees are. And so down here, we're going to just use some different shades of green. And this is our big, beautiful sky. And down here, we're just putting a thick layer of trees. And some trees might be taller than other trees. And we're also going to be layering the different colors. Now, all I'm doing is drawing one middle line and some lines coming down to make that shape of the tree. And I'm going to do this all the way across with this color. And then I'm gonna go back in and add other tints and shades of green. Maybe even a little bit of brown, maybe a little bit of white for some snow. And I'm just making this thick layer of trees for the forest that is sitting below this beautiful northern light sky. Now I have a row of kind of that regular green, and so I might go in and add some lighter green trees. And I might not put these everywhere. I'll just kind of mix them in. And so the layering is what's gonna make it look like a really thick forest. There's trees that are lighter and darker, and they're all together. I also am just putting a little bit of the green down at the bottom to show kind of the ground. And so we're just layering these trees up, making that really nice thick forest floor here. I really like this really dark green, so I'm gonna go in and put some of these in here. And I'm gonna try to do a little more detail on these because these are really dark and prominent. They really show up. So it's still that general shape, but look at that. You're really starting to see the layers of the trees coming together and looking like a forest with this beautiful sky above. This ends up looking really cool. And so again, I'm gonna go all the way across, adding in these darker layers of trees. One more color, I found a different shade of green. I'm adding a fourth layer of trees. And I think that's really going to bring this all together for a beautiful forest down here. And it really makes the sky look so cool to have all these trees right below it. So I'm just kind of adding those in. Especially any areas that I see a lot of the sky showing through, I can add the trees in and kind of fill that in. That is looking amazing. I might go back and just add some little highlights of snow on the tops of some of the trees. Just a little bit. You don't want to go crazy. But adding that highlight looks really nice. Uh-oh. Gotta be careful not to push on these too hard or you'll do like me and it pops right in half. Gentle is key with our oil pastels. All right, now that is one beautiful sky with a beautiful forest below, and I can't wait to see your picture of the Northern Lights.